Good day, everyone. So today's mini lecture is about Chapter 5, Innovation or the Creative Pursuit of Ideas. And this is session 1.2, so it's really just the second in our lecture series. So today by today you should be already thinking about an idea or a product that you might want to create a business plan for. My suggestion is at this point, you should be thinking of different products or services. Remember that a product can be a service like banking or a barbershop. So you can think of several of these products. It can also be a tangible item. And later on, as we develop our ideas, you can narrow down your ideas to one or two. And finally, one very good product that we could use to create a business plan around. And today, what I'm going to do is try to help you on that process, on that journey, by giving you some ideas and also how to develop our creativity in developing and addressing these ideas. Okay, if we can get the slide to go. There you go. So the first thing is we need to be aware of what's the typical source of innovative ideas. In other words, where do these brilliant ideas come from that many entrepreneurs use to become successful? The first source, which is really important, and we'll talk about this later on in the coming sessions, is the external and internal environments. These are the different trends that can alert entrepreneurs to opportunities. So these trends signal shifts in current thinking or current paradigms in major populations. Um, and these are valuable insights that constitute source of potential entrepreneurial ideas. So what do we mean exactly by external and internal environments? So you might be very familiar with this, and this is very similar to a what we call a pestle analysis. And in many business subjects, you will be using this sort of approach to analyze your environment, so the things around you, in other words. And although it's not arranged in your typical order here, but this is again very similar to what we call a pestle analysis. So P stands for political trends, E stands for economic trends, S for societal or social cultural trends, T for technology, E for environment or the physical environment, such as your natural resources. And finally, L stands for legal. So in this particular slide, you will see that legal and political are lumped together. So what's important with this analysis is for us to realize that there are trends that are happening currently, and this is actually a valuable source of ideas for business. In fact, if we've got a brilliant, or we have an idea for a product, what can determine whether it's going to be successful or not is whether there's a current trend in the market that supports that business idea. So, you know, even if you've got a brilliant idea or you think it's brilliant, but if there's no trend that supports it, then you may not be successful. And I want to point out that part of these is what we call the physical environment trend. So, for example, people are realizing that burning fossil fuel is harming our environment. It contributes to global warming and climate change. And therefore, that particular trend is driving a lot of innovation in renewable energy, like wind power or wave power. These are sustainable energy sources that do not burn fossil fuel. And this is just an example of why these ideas are very successful. Many homes out there use solar panels, And again, this is the driving force here, is the fact that there's a lot of awareness about the damage that burning fossil fuel like oil, and this is what is driving these trends, or drive this innovation. So think about that. There may be some societal trends that are happening right now that might be a source of a good business idea. Right now, we're in the midst of a health catastrophe, or a health crisis with COVID-19. And while we see a crisis, some people, and that's what we really should see it, is it could be an opportunity for a business idea. Remember, a business idea helps us in terms of profit if we are the businessman, but it also has a contribution to society, in the sense that it solves people's problems. So think about a societal trend such as COVID-19, and how that can be an opportunity for a businessman or entrepreneur. It could be in terms of the manufacturing of face masks, the manufacture of face shields. It could be a device that helps us protect ourselves from disease, or from COVID-19, or from viruses. Or as it could simply be a sport or a hobby that you could do, that promotes working from home, or exercising from home, because a lot of people are staying home at the moment. So these are just examples of how these trends can support a business. A word of caution, though, is a trend might be temporary. In other words, like COVID-19, we're, knock on wood, we are hoping that this is a temporary thing. Hopefully by next year, we will have less of this disease. And so you need to be careful that, okay, if you want to start a factory building face masks, but by the time you're making these face masks, the demand could be much less if the disease is gone. So the trend has to be something that we hope will continue on for many years. And if a trend does not continue on for many years, they say that's what we call a fad rather than a trend. So when you're identifying trends, how long has that trend been going on? And do you expect that trend to go on years from now? So again, these are sources of ideas for entrepreneurial ventures. Entrepreneurs can use their existing knowledge base acquired through work, experience, and education. And again, this is really, really important. And I think it's probably the most common source of business ideas. When you have exposure in an industry, and you get to know more about the industry, it helps you detect whether there are gaps in the market, if there are problems that are not being solved within the industry. And therefore, you could possibly use that knowledge to help you start a business. Last term, we had a group of students in this same unit, and they were thinking about their own knowledge and their own experience, and how they could turn that knowledge into an opportunity. And what they found was they looked at their own experience as students, and looked at the needs that they encountered when they first came to Melbourne. These are international students. And they found that when they came to Melbourne, they knew nobody, they had no friends. There was a lot of information that they needed to know about living in Melbourne. Where do you sort of live? A good, reasonable place where you could pay a reasonable amount in rent. And also the proximity to the school, and even questions about what's the best school to go to. All of those lack of information that they needed, they thought about, okay, can we provide this service to future students who are coming in? And that became their business idea. In other words, it was a consultancy that was designed to help international students who were just coming into Melbourne. So it's a very successful assignment. I gave them a high distinction. So again, think about that. Your own experience is a vast trove or treasure trove of ideas that you could use to start your business. Okay, some other sources of innovative ideas. It could be from unexpected occurrences. For example, unexpected success. The makers of Zoom, which we're using here in school, they never expected that they would be so successful. And a Zoom, very similar to Skype, but then it became really, really popular because of this crisis. And we think that even when COVID-19 is gone, because so many people have now become familiar with Zoom, it will be the most popular application for online learning or even video conferencing. Other unexpected things it could be a tragedy. For example, the 9/11 terrorist attack in New York. While that is a crisis, but it could be an opportunity. For example, if you're in the security business. Here's another unexpected success or an unexpected discovery: the drug minoxidil. Minoxidil was first designed uh, as a high blood pressure medication, and they found out that there was a side effect, and the side effect was it actually encouraged hair growth, and therefore minoxidil became an unexpected from a side effect. It became a drug for hair growth. Okay, so other sources of innovative ideas include incongruities, or what we call when what we first thought was impossible, but now is possible because of technology or some other reason. And this could be a source of, again, a business idea. We never thought that we would have ride-share applications. In other words, an application or a software that we could use to connect people providing a ride to people looking for a ride. So, and then therefore Uber was born. And Uber has now taken over the industry in terms of, and even the taxi industry is affected by this. Because of this, we didn't think it was possible that you could actually easily call for a cab, and a cab could be right there within minutes. And what we thought was impossible in terms of would you be able to find out how much you were going to pay for a cab? This used to be impossible until today's technology has come in. Driverless cars is another phenomenon that is going to come up very soon. And again, this is used to be thought impossible, but now we know that it is actually a technology that exists. A business idea could come from what we call a process need. And there are many products such as sugar-free products right now, where it was born from the fact that there are people who don't want sugar in their products, not just diabetics, but even people who are trying to lose weight, and they've decided that sugar is one of those things that can actually harm your body, and even too much sugar in particular. So when people found that there's a need to remove the sugar from these products, then these products were created for that, to fill that need. There was a need for people to be able to heat things in a quicker manner, and therefore microwave ovens came in and became very popular. Vacuuming the house is something that I'm sure people don't like to do. It's time consuming. It can be very tiring, very noisy. It's probably the least chore that we like to do in our house, cleaning our house. So therefore, and knowing that, of course, in these days people have less and less time, and robot vacuums were created. And if you don't know what that is, just Google it, and there are some robot vacuum cleaners that go around your house automatically, and you don't have to do anything. All you need to do is, at the end of the day, is remove the dust compartment and clean it, but it just vacuums by itself. Um, there are ovens that clean themselves, so that's called a pyrolytic oven. So let's say if you've ever tried to clean an oven before, you'll realize how, again, time consuming and difficult it is. The grease has basically baked on into the oven. It's really difficult to take out the grease stains. And a pyrolytic oven, you just turn it on, and in a couple of hours, all of that grease will turn into ash. And it'll be very easy to sort of just wipe off the ash and clean your oven. Another phenomenon is grocery delivery. If you think about it, 10 years or 15 years ago, this was probably something we never thought would happen. But again, because time is such a valuable resource, people have taken to calling up their grocery to have their grocery delivered. And especially now with COVID-19, again, this is very, very popular. Another variation of this grocery delivery is the fact that even picking and choosing your grocery can be a bit of a task and can be time consuming. And if you're only, let's say, one or two in the household, you go to the grocery, you end up buying, a lot of vegetables, and you can't really finish the entire bunch of vegetables. So that phenomenon has led to delivery services where you don't order, you don't start by thinking of your raw materials, like you don't start by thinking of onions and garlic. You first think about, okay, what's the dish that you want to make, and you choose the dish, like for example a spaghetti bolognese. Choose a spaghetti bolognese, and the grocery delivery will automatically send you the pasta, the ground meat, the tomato sauce, the garlic, and whatever ingredients come into a spaghetti bolognese. So it's a completely different way of thinking. And again, it's part of thinking about a problem and thinking about how we can solve that problem. Other ideas might come from how the way industry is just naturally evolving or changing. The healthcare industry, for example, it used to be that you have to go to a hospital to get healthcare or to a clinic. But because of changing times, doctors can actually go to your home to deliver that healthcare, or healthcare via an online source like Zoom. Nowadays, doctors can actually give you some consultation. You just basically book an appointment and go to a Zoom session, and the doctor can diagnose you based on a Zoom and online session. Of course, if you need more tests, then you'll have to go to an actual clinic to get your tests done, your blood tests, for example. Education at home. So education, again, traditionally always used to mean that the student needed to go to school. Nowadays, even before COVID-19, education at home has become more and more popular. News consumption. We used to listen to the news via the radio, via TV, or we bought a newspaper, and therefore consumption is restricted in the sense that it doesn't mean that if 20 years ago, if you wanted to know what the news was, it would be a little bit more difficult to do that. You'd have to find yourself a newspaper, and the newspaper could be old, could be 24 hours old, or you switch on the TV to look for the news, but it doesn't necessarily mean the news is on at that particular time. But today's news consumption means that if you needed news, you could turn on your phone and seek a news website, and you get the latest right away very quickly. So what ideas, and just again, how do these ideas come about? It usually stems from a problem that people, entrepreneurs are seeing, and solutions to those problems, either technological solutions or process solutions. So entrepreneurs use imagination and creativity and blend that with a process, or they blend it with basically um, a very process oriented approach to develop solutions. So remember that innovation is a combination of creativity and logical process. So in other words, it doesn't become an innovation uh, purely from creativity. There has to be a practical side, and it has to be something that becomes useful before it becomes a real innovation. So creative thinking is blended with imagination in a logical process. So true innovation is developing an ability to see, recognize, and create opportunity where others find only problems. So I think we've got a video where there is a entrepreneur who started a chain of coffee shops in the UK before the time of Starbucks. And you know, when she admitted that all she saw was a problem, for when she first thought about this issue, she went to New York and she said, in New York you've got all these cafes, but in London there were no cafes, and all she saw was, gee, I wish that there was a cafe that I could go to, and it was her problem. But she didn't see it as an opportunity until her brother actually said to her, you know what, that's an opportunity. So you can see that you wanted a cup of coffee, a really good cup of coffee in London, but you couldn't find one. Um, and therefore, why don't we create a chain of coffee shops that can fill that gap, that fill that problem? So it's a personal problem on her part, and she used her own personal experience as a way to develop a business idea. So there are basically two approaches to solving problems or creative problem solving. And you could be one or the other, or hopefully you are a combination of being an adapter or an innovator. And in fact, later on, we'll talk about what do you mean by left brain thinking and right brain thinking. The left brain thinker is the adapter, and he or she employs a disciplined methodological methodological methodic methodological approach to problem solving. So they're concerned about solving and finding problems, and they look at current practices and try to see how they can fix that particular current practice. And they tend to be very purpose and intention oriented. So that's an adapter, but an innovator approaches it more as a right brain thinker, very expansive approach, very imaginative, and he approaches tasks from unusual angles. He thinks, or he or she thinks, the innovator thinks that some tasks can be completely changed. It's not an incremental change, but a very mind-blowing, very innovative approach. So he can question basic assumptions related to current practices, has very little regards to means, and he's in fact more interested in how do we achieve, and it's more interested in how do we get to the journey, to the journey's end. And of course, he or she has very little tolerance for routinary work. So if we combine these two approaches, we can have a very innovative idea. So creativity is a process that can be developed and improved, and some individuals have a greater aptitude for creativity than others. What this means is, while it's true, there are some people who are naturally very creative, very innovative. Um, you can develop it. You can improve your own creativity if you basically do some exercises and basically challenge your mind. Your brain is very much like your body. In order to be physically fit, you need to exercise, you need to actually move. Same thing with the brain. If you want to develop your brain to be more creative, to be more analytical, then you need to use it. Okay, you need to sort of do some exercises to improve those skills. So there are some ways to develop creativity. One way is to recognize relationships. In other words, we look for different or unorthodox relationships between elements and people around you. I guess the best example I can think of here is some people looking at Yellowstone National Park in the United States. Yellowstone is a vast wilderness reserve with beautiful trees, beautiful scenery, beautiful animals. But unfortunately, and I think this was due to people coming in and hunting wolves. The wolf in that area became practically extinct. There used to be a lot of wolves, but because people were hunting them down and then shooting them because they felt that these were pests, and eventually the wolves disappeared in Yellowstone. But some conservationists thought that if we bring in the wolf, it can actually improve the health of the entire of the ecosystem. And you might think, okay, what's the relationship between a wolf and improving the entire ecology and ecosystem in national park? And then they found out that there's a relationship. It's very unorthodox. It's uh, not obvious. But if you bring in the wolf controls the deer. It basically preys on deer and controls the number of deer in the park. What do deers eat? They eat vegetation, and the less deer there are, then then this more vegetation will happen. So that little cycle was broken when people killed the wolf, but when they returned the wolf, it actually kept the deer population in balance, or at a healthy number, which basically helped the development of vegetation, and therefore trees, plants, etc., became more numerous in Yellowstone Park. And again, it's interesting to know that the relationship between a wolf and the entire ecosystem, and how that this it's connected. It's a circle of life, so to speak. So if we recognize such relationships, and again, these relationships don't have to be in the field of conservation, it could be in the field of science, in the field of business. If we are train ourselves to find these relationships, this is usually a way to develop our own creativity. Another way is to develop a functional perspective. In other words, looking at objects or looking at people and finding out how can this person or how can this object be useful to you as a person, or maybe how can you be useful to another person, right? So if you think about that all the time and how it can be, you can use a particular item and how can that can improve your life, then that's the spark of a creative process. So your friend, you might have a friend, and your friend is really very, very good at, say, tennis. He plays tennis very well, and you think, okay, that's interesting. But then, can that friend of yours actually be useful to you? Can that person actually teach you how to play tennis? And maybe that can improve your physical fitness. So think about it in different perspectives. The other approach is, of course, using both hemispheres of your brain. And they say that when you're developing relationships, at the very top here, or developing a functional perspective, that is actually a way of developing your left and your right brain. Recognizing relationships is a right brain function. and you're developing your functional perspective is a left brain function. So the right brain helps us understand analogies, imagine things, and synthesize information, while the left brain helps us analyze, verbalize, and use rational approaches to problem solving. Now, if you're confused, my way of remembering this is left brain is logical thinking. Okay, so it helps you with your logical thinking, and right brain helps us with our artistic reasoning. So our how to appreciate art, how do we appreciate beautiful scenery, that actually comes from our right brain. And how do we appreciate relationships between things and people, and that is again a right brain function. Later on, we can probably do an exercise in class about how we can develop our left and our right brain thinking. So again, just to remind everybody, your left hemisphere or your left brain is in charge of your verbal reasoning, your analytical skills, your abstract reasoning, your rationality, and your logical thinking. While the right brain is usually nonverbal, it's used to synthesize things, seeing how little parts and how you can bring that together and how you make things nicer or more beautiful. And it's very intuitive and imaginative. That's basically right brain thinking. So they say the best artists in the world, or if you're a musician and you're very artistic and very creative, usually that is your right brain at work. Okay, now as leaders or future leaders, you might think of yourself. I mean, if you are starting a business and the business depends a lot on innovation or creativity, you might ask yourselves, okay, how do I create an environment in my business where creativity thrives? In other words, how do we make our employees become more creative? And if they are already creative, how do we keep them to be more creative? So I've got a lot of pointers here. I'm not going to go to everyone. I'll just go through the what I've already put in bold. So trustful management that does not over control employees. So if we tend to be more controlling of our employees, what's going to happen is the employees don't want to think anymore. They always want to ask you, "What do I do, boss?" So if that's always your attitude, that don't do that, you wait for my instructions. If that's the way you handle things, what's going to happen is your employees are not going to be thinking for themselves. They will just be waiting for you to give them instructions. And if you do that, that's basically stifles their creativity. Considerable contact and communication with outsiders. So within your business, your employees should be encouraged to always contact the outside world, be in communication with other people, with other countries. In fact, one way companies sort of expand and improve their creativity is to send their employees to other countries so that they can experience a very different way of thinking. So Australian company might be thinking, okay, what are some ideas that we could use? Why don't we send our employee to Japan, where people think in a very oriental way, and maybe we could use that perspective, those ideas back here in Australia. Shouldn't have any fear of negative consequences for making a mistake. In other words, if your employees make mistakes, don't be angry at them. Don't punish them. In many ways, the creative process is about learning from your own mistakes. So you should encourage them, in fact, to experiment a bit. As long as they learn. What's bad is if they keep making the same mistakes over and over again, then they're not learning. So that's not good. So, but if you are confident that they're learning from their mistakes, and this is in fact something you should encourage. You should encourage them to make mistakes. The use of techniques that encourage ideas, including suggestion systems and brainstorming. So Again, these are some tips of how we could improve creativity within our organization. Innovation and the entrepreneur. So remember that innovation is, as I was saying before, it's a process by which entrepreneurs convert opportunities into marketable solutions. In other words, you might have a solution, but if it's too expensive to produce, then it's probably not practical. And that's not true innovation if you have an idea that can't be really turned into a sustainable enterprise. Innovation is combination of the vision to create a good idea and the perseverance and dedication to remain with the concept through implementation. So we'll be watching videos about how entrepreneurs can be very persevering if they're really passionate about their idea. And even if they fail once or twice, if they're so confident that their idea is good, then many of them will really push until the idea gains traction, so to speak. So innovation is a key function in the entrepreneurial process. In other words, you can't be an entrepreneur if you are not innovative. Okay, so innovation in action. And remember that innovation comes in many forms. It does not have to be a totally new invention, a totally new product or service, as mentioned here. But it could be. And many of these ideas, for example, the Wright brothers created the airplane. Thomas Edison used the light or invented the light bulb. Alexander Graham Bell created the telephone. These are some inventions that are, have basically helped shape the world. They're mind-blowing, revolutionary inventions and innovation. But then it could simply be an existing application, and then you're simply reusing that application for something else. And a while ago was talking about minoxidil, a drug which was initially invented to control blood pressure, but now it is used to grow hair. So that's a great example of an extension. Duplication is a creative replication of an existing concept. So Walmart, if you think about it, is just a department store, and department stores have been around for probably 100 years or so. But what Walmart did was they tweaked that idea and they created a huge department store, tremendously big, so bigger than Costco, so to speak. And unfortunately, we don't have Walmart here in Australia. But in the US, it's a giant. It's the biggest, I believe it's the biggest employer, one of the biggest companies in the United States. That's Walmart. And they're very successful in the United States because they simply took an existing idea and replicated that to an enormous scale. Okay. Another type of innovation is called synthesis, combining concepts and factors into a new formulation or use. So think about the iPhone, and the Steve Jobs, of course, the leader of Apple. He was the one, along with, of course, some very innovative engineers within his company. They came up with the iPhone, which really is not entirely new. It used different technology and brought them together to make a very innovative product. So touchscreen, for example, was around even before iPhone was introduced. The technology for mobile technology is, of course, an old technology, a couple of decades old. What else? GPS technology. So knowing where you are at one particular time, using a satellite to pinpoint your location. That is not new, but iPhone used it and incorporated into their phone. Again, bringing different technologies together is called synthesis. And if you think about it, that's really the source of many innovations nowadays. A lot of things have already been invented. All you really need to do is bring them together, maybe in a different form, maybe using a technology for a different reason. There's a lot of that happening nowadays. Okay, I think this is our last slide. Yes, it is. And this simply says this is basically a discussion about what innovation is not. So, in other words, many people think innovation is a certain thing, but these are misconceptions. And the first is called, many people think that you can plan and predict that innovation is going to happen. But the truth is innovation is often unplanned, it's unpredictable. You could be developing a product for something, and then it's a big flop, but you turn out that that flop can actually be turned into a success in another industry. Again, my example would be minoxidil. Um, Technical specifications must be thoroughly prepared. So people think that in order to be innovative, you need to have very good technical specs, but not necessarily. Um, in fact, in many cases, you don't have the specifications yet. You just have a germ of an idea, and you're trying to develop it to reach the end goal. Okay, there are stories of innovators or entrepreneurs with an end goal in mind. They don't know the details of how you're going to get to the end goal, but they work through that very slowly until they get to that the end goal. Innovation relies on dreams and blue sky ideas, not necessarily. As discussed in the previous slide, many innovation actually comes from just your day-to-day processes, and you can use that and extend that process. In the case of Walmart, it's already an existing idea. They just expanded it. Big projects will develop better innovations than smaller ones. Again, this is a misconception. It's not true. There are many innovations that start from a small idea. And lastly, technology is the driving force of innovation success. That is not true. Technology enables innovation, but the driving force of innovation success is really consumers and the problems that they have. And the technology just is there to sort of solve that problem. So that's it. That's it for our slides today. Again, in a couple of, maybe within today, we will do an exercise that helps us develop our left and right brain creativity.